discussion, allow me to welcome you to Ghana, the land of opportunity, optimism, and opportunities. Ladies and gentlemen, for the next few minutes, please lend your attention to the screen as we behold Ghana through the Ghana Investment Promotion Center.
Center of the world and home to the headquarters of the AFCFTA. Abundant resources and limitless opportunities for business and investment. A great story of growth and attractive returns in a fast transforming country. Be part of this great opportunity and optimism. Invest in Ghana. Make it happen with the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, GIPC. Connect, let's talk, and guide you through numerous incentive packages for investment. We are open and ready for partnerships to grow in Ghana and grow with Ghana. Locate us at Vivo Place Cantonment, Accra, or call us 0302-665-12529. Online at www.gipc.gov.gh and on all social media platforms at GIPC Ghana. Drop us a mail, info@gipc.gov.gh. GIPC, your first port of call for investing in Ghana.
1, 2. And now, ladies and gentlemen, for a land of openness, opportunities, and optimism, please welcome the Deputy Chief Executive Officer of the GIPC, Mr. Yao Amoating Efriye. A round of applause as he comes.
Your Royal Highness, Togbe Afede the 14th, Excellencies, members of the diplomatic community, the leadership of the World Trade Center Association, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all protocols are observed. Compliments from the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, the government of Ghana's principal investment agency. It is a pleasure to address this important meeting that allows stakeholders to speak about their trade and investment appeal to the World Trade Center Association. This meeting is timely, especially against the current global context that has amplified protectionism, nearshoring and reshoring, and supply chain distortions with ramifications for economies like Ghana's. Thankfully, the world is rebounding, albeit sluggishly, as global flows of foreign direct investment recovers to pre-pandemic levels. Cross-border deals and international project finance are particularly strong in some parts of the world. However, the recovery of greenfield investment in industry remains fragile globally, especially in developing countries where fiscal incentives and general economic headwinds constrain direct and portfolio capital. Against this backdrop, we in Ghana are proud of the confidence that the international investor community continues to have in our country. In 2021, Ghana was ranked the second highest recipient of foreign direct investment in West Africa after Nigeria, attracting and retaining $2.6 billion in mainly extractive industry investment and other notable greenfield projects in cement manufacturing. Our excellent global reputation means that Ghana continues to rank highly as a desirable destination for foreign direct investment in the continent. Despite our continued strong performance as a destination for capital in Africa, we must hasten cautiously as several fragilities still confront the global economy. First, the weak growth of real productive investment persists amidst global debt and inflationary pressures affecting the momentum for recovery in international investment, which may hamper our efforts as a country to attract finance for sustainable development. But there is a silver lining for us here in Ghana and indeed the continent, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is growth. Ghana continues to grow despite our immediate economic headwinds. Despite the dimmed forecasts in previous quarters, the fourth quarter of 2022 witnessed 3.7% in expansion of the economy against the doomsday analysts that predicted 2.6%. Against this context, The government of Ghana is pursuing a combination of export, domestic revenue mobilization, and an aggressive investment-led recovery. As the government of Ghana's principal investment promotion agency, GIPC is committed to this recalibration effort underpinned by the Ghana Cares Obatampa flagship policy. The CARES objective, ladies and gentlemen, is to mobilize GH 100 billion cedis, approximately $8 billion in inward inflows into the country to finance priority initiatives and projects. By implementing the CARES policy, the government has set for itself an ambitious target to attract and retain foreign direct investment, ring-fence for manufacturing, agribusiness, healthcare, housing, communications, infrastructure, and tourism. There are two categories of projects under the CARES objective. One is private sector-led, and the other is government of Ghana-led, and is typically in the form of public-private partnerships and has a larger ticket size of between $100 million to approximately $1 billion plus. The private sector joint venture projects require multiple financing options, for example, debt, equity, mezzanine, project finance, and patient concessionary financing that must come from home and our partners in Africa, as well as internationally. At GIPC, we believe that augmenting the AFCFTA with an investment-led approach under the Ghana Cares Obatampa program is a policy worth pursuing to ensure that we ready Ghanaian businesses and joint venture arrangements to export into the 1.3 billion population market with a combined and growing GDP of $3.4 trillion. Trading under the AFCFTA commenced on the 1st of January 2021, and Ghana was the first country in Africa to export to the bloc. Companies like Casapreco, a household name in Ghana, and Gandor Cosmetics were among the first to export goods within the bloc. And we in Ghana will continue to seek markets for our SMEs, who constitute 60% of labor and contribute approximately 70% to our country's GDP. Therefore, accelerating intra-Africa trade and investment cooperation is not out of place with our export and investment-led approach. It is an antidote to fostering collective prosperity at a time when regional trading blocs globally are strengthening collaboration, and we must do the same on the continent. As has been cited, the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, PAPS, a recent innovation enabling cross-border capital flows and transactions, is an excellent example of the AFCFTA de-risking intra-African transactions into critical sectors. In that vein, ladies and gentlemen, GIPC recognizes the power and potential of Ghana's enviable position as the Secretariat of the AFCFTA and is working to make the case to the international investor community to invest, firstly, in Ghana, grow in Ghana, and then springboard into the African trading bloc that presents excellent returns for goods and services. Thankfully, because of our geographical proximity, resource and market prospects, compliance to the rule of law that protects investment, guarantees against expropriation, and our enviable political stability, safety, and youthful dynamism, Ghana is undoubtedly a desirable destination for all types of greenfield, brownfield, and portfolio investment in the continent. Although our preference as a country and as an agency is for greenfield investments because of the extensive benefits for jobs, improved livelihoods, skills transfer, long-term economic benefits, and infrastructure, we recognize that in the post-COVID environment, greenfield investments are difficult to attract. So we are also focusing on brownfield and portfolio investments that have a cascading impact on our priority sectors. And as an agency, we are working across government to simplify the processes for the investor to comply through our business regulatory reforms and continue to reduce red tape by adopting business-friendly and flexible approaches to eradicating bureaucratic processes and provide genuine support to the private sector. We are also building broad consensus to liberalize aspects of Ghana's investment regulation and capital thresholds through reforms to the GIPC Act to ensure that Ghana becomes competitive with our peers in the continent and to ensure that we de-risk where we must to ensure that the regional hub strategy for aviation, manufacturing, ports and logistics, and petroleum is plausible in the near term. We at GIPC shall continue to advocate against bureaucratic impediments to doing business across all categories of investment in Ghana. And whilst doing so, we remind ourselves that there is a pool of portfolio money that is looking for a home. And ladies and gentlemen, I contend that Ghana is ready to be that home. At GIPC, we ensure that companies have the tools, incentives, and certainty to do business, repatriate capital, conclude technology transfer agreements and bilateral investment treaties, and provide a liaison service through our aftercare division to address investor disputes. So in conclusion, the Ghana outlook is favorable, with medium-term growth pegged at 5% averagely between now and 2026. We are resilient because short-term impediments do not hold us back, and we expect a turnaround post-IMF anchored on fiscal and sound financial management. There is dynamism in our market, and there is a tremendous opportunity and return on your investment. We are open and optimistic about the future because we are forging new relationships and establishing linkages through shared values, interests, and pragmatism with African and global economies, and encourage companies here to firstly grow in Ghana, grow with Ghana, and then springboard into the AFCFTA. And with these remarks, I wish us all an impactful meeting, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Mr. Yawa Moating-Afriye is the Deputy CEO of the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, making such a compelling case for us to come, grow in Ghana, and grow with Ghana, a land of openness, opportunities, and as well as optimism. Which brings us to the next session, which is a panel discussion. Help me welcome the members of this panel who would be deliberating for 30 minutes, and after that, engaging you, our wide audience, for 15 minutes in Q&As. Toward a single African market, what will it take? Make welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Prudence Sebahizi. Please make welcome, Madam Nangula Uwanja. Make welcome Michael Koto, and the moderator, Managing Partner of ABN David, Mr. David Ofosu Dote. The after video, and then the panel.
Okay, yes, so thank you, Director of Ceremonies. I hope you can all hear me. So I think the panel has been introduced, but I will just take a 30 seconds round for you to tell us exactly what each of you do, so we set it in context. So starting from Prudence.
Thank you very much, David. My name is Prudence Sebahizi. I'm the Director for Institutional Matters and Programs Coordination at the AFCFTA Secretariat here in Accra.
Thank you. Yes, please go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Nangula Wanja. I'm the Chairperson and CEO of the Namibia Investment Promotion and Development Board.
Yeah, Michael.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Michael Koto. I'm Head of Strategy at Afro Champions. Afro Champions is a public-private partnership organization that promotes private sector-led initiatives in African integration.
Okay, so let's start with you, Prudence, being in charge of the institutional matters as the Secretariat. I mean, with the whole growth of geopolitics and the dynamics changing around the world with a multipolar world, as is being talked about a lot these days, de-dollarization, the rise of China and everything. How does the AFCFTA still sit in terms of its ability to take Africa to the next stage? Is it still relevant in the midst of all these geopolitical changes?
Thank you very much. Let me articulate my argument around 3 points. The first one, which has been overemphasized this morning, one would ask a question: why is Africa as a continent still lagging behind? That's the question that we have to answer, all of us here. And the second question will be, why do we believe that AFCFTA is a solution? Why do we believe that AFCFTA can provide a solution? And then thirdly, what can we do to make it happen? If I start with the first question of why Africa is still lagging behind, there are so many reasons that have been given. One might say maybe Africa has been suffering from leadership problems, peace and security, lack of peace and security, poor infrastructure. There are a number of economic problems that we have been suffering, but now that we are talking about economic integration, let's focus on issues that lack of economic integration has contributed to where Africa is now. Today's statistics in the morning revealed that Africa, when you look at the share of Africa in world trade, it's less than 3%. And the same applies for the share of Africa's investment. The share of FDI, foreign direct investment, that come to Africa is still less than 3%. And we all know that Africa's population, which is now estimated at 1.4 billion people, accounts for more than 17% of the global Africa. So there is a missing match. Our population, the weight of the population in the global population does not match the weight of our economy. Now, why do we think AFCFTA can provide a solution? AFCFTA can provide a solution in 2 ways. One, we are talking about expanding a market that is going to be attractive enough for investment. Here we are talking about, of course, 1.4 billion people, which is going to increase in the next 10 years to 1.7 billion people. And it's going to be a very significant portion of global population. But we're also talking about the purchasing power of Africa, which is now 3.4 trillion in terms of US dollars account. But this is not only where AFCFTA provides a solution. Having experienced the lack of trade among ourselves, having been relying on importation on what we need, I think there is a big potential now for investors to come and look inward in Africa. What can we produce in Africa that will fill the gap that is already there, that will feed the market that is already there? So the second way AFCFTA is going to provide a solution is by providing opportunity for Africa's industrialization. I will not go back to the statistics that our Secretary General has mentioned in the morning, but there are 4 priority areas that have been tested where investors should focus on. We have been told agriculture and agro-processing. We have been told automotive industry. We have been told pharmaceuticals, and we have been told transport and logistics. And for us to get there, of course, there are a number of actions. Maybe I will come back later to tell you what needs to be done, because it's not automatic. We have to make our efforts to get there.
Yeah, thank you. I will definitely come back to you on that. Ms. Nangula, I mean, I do hear quite a lot of promise when we talk about Africa and AFC, FTA, etc. But if you take a look, everything is premised on the fact that there is 1.4 billion people, we are one market, or we are seeking to become one market, etc. But here you are, the Deputy CEO of GIPC, the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, just spoke, talked about Ghana. You are from Namibia. There's a Namibia occasion. I'm yet to see any event where investment promotion entities across Africa teamed up, for example, and said we were pitching for foreign direct investors together. Each of the foreigners here, or those from outside Africa, has 54 or 55 countries, depending on who is counting. What exactly makes a push by Namibia or any investment promotion center think that they see investors they are pitching with see Africa as one market, when actually we are pitching as individual countries?
Thank you very much. That's a very, very good question and a long one. You know, one thing I always say is if we take the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement and we approach Africa as a, you know, like survival of the fittest, let's put it that way, that every country is on their own and the country that is best fit will be the one that benefits, then we will not see the benefit of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. And therefore, I agree with you that collaboration is key, and we need to find out what are the comparable advantages or the comparative advantages of each country. What has each country got to do with to the market? Of course, we all face similar challenges. We all have got unemployment, and we need to deal with them in our countries. Yet we need to be conscious of the fact that if I survive or if I compete at the expense of the next African country, then that success is not sustainable. I always say that if you enter into a relationship and whether you are benefiting or you are suffering more than the next person, you need to get out of that relationship. And I think that is the awareness that we need to create. So from Investment Promotion Board, what have we done? Last year in June, as investment promotion agencies, we actually had a first meeting that we had in Cairo, Egypt, that all the Africa investment promotion agencies came together. And we say, in light of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, what are we going to do as investment promotion agencies to collaborate to make sure that we draw investments into Africa and not to compete against each other? And that meeting was followed up by another meeting that we had this year at the beginning of the year in Ghana. So we actually even have a WhatsApp group where we, as the leaders of investment promotion agencies, are to have to start that collaboration of saying, how do we collaborate with each other? We have entered into memorandum of understanding between various investment promotion agencies so that we can learn together, we can identify sectors that we need to promote together, countries that are together, whether it is, for example, you take Namibia, Zambia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Angola, we share a border. They say it's about the only area probably in the world where you've got 5 countries meeting. And we have designated one area as a transfrontier where we are promoting tourism together. And we are promoting not only tourism, but the investment in tourism. So yes, definitely not at the place where we need to be, but we understand that the success of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement depends on us collaborating, and I believe we have started the journey on that collaboration.
I mean, if you can keep the microphone for another minute, I will be happy to hear from you a bit more as to how you hope to achieve this. I understand the meeting in Cairo and attempt to collaborate together, but if I listen to a lot of investment authorities, and I went to your website, the Namibian Investment Authority website. There are 7 key points. The last one, incidentally, the 7th point, is the AFCFTA. So, and I see similar things across. Now, each investment authority I've looked at in Africa claims to be the gateway to the AFCFTA. If there are so many gates, what are you doing to come together? What about the regional promotion? I will be happy to hear what exactly are you doing in the next 1 year. Everybody's entering a different gate.
Yeah. No, there should be many gates, because the one thing I don't think is a zero-sum game. It's not about one of us makes it and then the others don't. And therefore, it's definitely about more of us making it. Let's look at it. For example, of course, you've got the SADC market, you've got the West market, you've got the East market. And whether it is looking at the logistics and transportation, it might be easier to get to some countries through one port and easier to get to others. And therefore, you need to find ways of, if you look, for example, there is a map of Africa where we looked at the logistic of how do you build roads and infrastructure that will run from Cairo to Cape Town, and that will run from the west to the coast. So you don't enter Africa through one gate. Yes, it's important that every country promotes themselves, but it's also important to understand that, yes, one entity can come through any door, and once you enter that door, you will be able also to enter the house.
Thank you. Michael, let me come to you. And this, particularly as much as possible, we can address it and touch on the SME component of the AFCFTA. Now, incidentally, China, India, and Africa now are all 1.4 billion. We incidentally are all 17% each of the global population. Suddenly, China is a big, suddenly India is a big market. China has been a big market. Africa is a small market. Why is Africa not a big market if it's 1.4 billion? And what can SMEs do to get very much integrated into the value chain of this big, continental free trade? Because if 80% of businesses are SMEs, then really they are the ones we should be talking about. What do we do, Michael?
So, the really unique thing about the AFCFTA is, for me, it's not an ordinary trade agreement. In most parts of the world, in other global regions, trade agreements of this nature, if you look at the EU or if you look at the North American arrangement or some of the, ASEAN, sort of arrangements, these regional trade treaties are used to reinforce pre-existing economic advantages. A lot of these regions have either already industrialized or partially industrialized. And what these regional trade agreements do is merely to reinforce an already existing process. In the case of Africa, we have an advantage. We have a unique opportunity to use the Continental Free Trade Agreement to be the fundamental driver of the continent's transformation. Infrastructure, industrialization, economic diversification, job creation. And so this is a continental free trade agreement unlike anything we've ever seen. And it's important that we continually remind ourselves of this very unique approach to continental transformation, which also means that we simply cannot copy and paste from a lot of the templates that have worked elsewhere. We hear of global best practices all the time. In this instance, we're going to have to create African best practices that have no precedence. We have to use a continental free trade agreement as the primary catalyst to industrialize Africa, as the primary catalyst to solve our infrastructure bottlenecks and build regional value chains. No continent, to the best of my knowledge, has done this before. And there's no way we can do this without a private sector. So I applaud our governments for accelerating the process of signing the agreement and having it ratified, and that's great. And now we are at the implementation stage. This is where we need to get the private sector to take ownership. And this is a point that I assert all the time. If the private sector doesn't take ownership of the process of implementation, it's not going to happen. Now, I make it a point at least once a week to talk to some small business owners somewhere in Accra, or if I happen to be another part of the continent, and just ask them whether they've heard of the AFTA. And increasingly, it's very disturbing. Very few of them have heard about it. If you ask them, if you go to the corner shop and ask, have you heard of AFTA? 80–90% of them haven't heard about it. So the awareness and the enthusiasm, it appears to me, so far, is still amongst very high-level officials, big corporations, civil society, academics, intellectuals who are very much aware of what the AFTA is. We need to have the AFTA get to the grassroots. And we need to have our startups and our SMEs understand that this is a great opportunity. In my opinion, the best way to get the SMEs in Africa involved in this is to just let them start trading. If it's possible, this might not be a conventional idea, a conventional approach. All businesses that qualify as small-scale businesses, small and medium enterprises in the continent, should be allowed to start exporting without any rules of origin compliance. If it's possible, we could cap the requirements. Above a certain value and volume of trade, you need to go through all the rigorous processes of getting your rules of origin and export certification and all of that. If we can, we should declare, we could even pilot it. It could be a tariff-free Africa Day. We can do it once a quarter, 4 times a year. If you're exporting below a certain volume and value, you don't have to go through any export processes, if it's possible, just as a pilot, to stimulate interest, get our small businesses interested. Even if they don't take advantage of it, it's the idea is still interesting enough to get them aware that there's this opportunity. So I think we need some disruptive approaches, some out-of-the-box approaches. And this idea I'm throwing out there is just one of those. It doesn't have to be exactly this. But we need to find a way to get our SMEs and our startups and our small businesses excited. They have to get excited about this opportunity first and foremost before they can start taking advantage of it. And I don't see a lot of that yet, and we need to do a lot of that. So the business associations in the continent, I think, have to, the chambers of commerce, the industry associations have to get to the forefront of this whole process of after implementation. And it's not easy, but I believe that the business associations, working with the business groups, will have to begin to take ownership of the process before we can get our small businesses excited.
Thank you, Michael. I'm coming to you, Prudence. I saw you smiling when Michael was talking, and I know you may have a response to that, but let me make your situation even worse before you come in. Now, and you and I have interacted a lot. I'm a strong believer that the after is not happening just because our leaders want it, but because businesses are pushing it. Intra-Africa trade moved from about 3% to about 15% before after. But what I think appears to be happening is that the elite appear to be capturing it and not translating it back down to the ordinary people. Just that's what Michael is trying to say. A couple of us were involved in a study recently, and we discovered that even among those who are aware about after, when you ask them the next question, how are you propositioning your business over the next 5 years to take advantage? The answer is 0. Now, as a person in charge of institutions and all these reforms, what exactly are you doing to respond to what Michael is talking about? And how do you stimulate the ordinary business to take advantage?
Yes, thank you. I was smiling when Mike was talking about what can be done to bring the FCFTA to the small and medium enterprises. And one of the suggestions that he made was to allow SMEs to export without rules of origin. That's why I was smiling. Of course, I understand the argument that he's making, but I just want to differ on that one because getting away of the rules of trade is not going to be a solution. The reason why we talk about rules of origin is to identify the origin of a product. Once you have established the origin of the product, then you can facilitate trade. And this we have to be very serious about it, because if you look at the businesses that happen here in Africa, even among SMEs. I was walking on the street around East Legon this weekend. I saw a Chinese engineer. He was supervising works around the road. And I saw all hawkers, Ghanaians, they were selling Chinese products around the whole street. None of those products were produced here in Ghana. None of them. All of them were imported from China. So how do you deal with that situation where those who are operating SMEs are busy working for China? Because when you sell China's product on our street, you are working for China. And that's the problem that rules of origin is coming to resolve. Let me come back to your question. I fully agree. AFCFTA, we talk about AFCFTA and we make it simple and we make it appear as if it is simple. It's very complex. It's very complex. We have to undertake a massive sensitization campaign to explain two things. One is what entails the rules of the market, the AFCFTA. When you talk about AFCFTA, what are the details of the rules? But more importantly, we also have to tell people that AFCFTA will not happen overnight. It's a process. It takes time. There is a number of reforms that have to be undertaken by governments. There are a number of capacity that have to be built on the continent for us to start enjoying the benefits of the AFCFTA. Just as an example, when we talk about tariff liberalization, the shortest period we can have a tariff on a product come to zero is 5 years. That's the shortest period. Others will take 10 years, and others will take 13 years, starting from January 2021. So people who've seen in the news that we have started trading, it doesn't mean that we bring immediately tariff to zero. So it's a process. But I just want to emphasize rules of origin is the core. But now to align myself with Mike, there is one scheme under the AFCFTA, we call it simplified trade regime. Once you have established what SMEs are trading across borders, the customs officials can make it easier, at least, for those SMEs to trade across borders without necessarily going through the hassles of certificate of origin, because they know that what they are trading is produced from the neighboring country. We might be able to identify what products are produced within Africa, and once we have done that, I don't need to show you my ID when I come to your house and you already know me. But when I cross a border, the immigration officers who don't know me, we always ask for my ID. So I think what he's talking about, can't we put in place a mechanism that will allow us to identify our SMEs, what they produce and what they sell, and then we make their life much easier for them to trade as we wait for 10 to 15 years to come so that we can have a fully fledged AFCFTA market.
Thank you. Ms. Nangula, let me come to you. I mean, I'm going to put you on the spot again. So we have a situation where we are all looking for FDIs everywhere. Take a typical Namibian investor. Is the Namibian Investments Authority encouraging Namibian investors to expand across Africa? And are there some examples? And if so, what are you doing? Or similarly, have you seen the Ghana Investments Promotion Authority asking its investors to expand across Africa? It seems that we define FDI as investments coming extra from outside Africa into Africa. What about within Africa? And related to that question, do you have data? For example, if you take, let's say, meat, is there data on aggregate demand? And therefore, your investors from Namibia know exactly where to export to. Is that data available?
Yes.
The question was for...
Sorry, is it for me?
Yes, it's for Ms. Nangula from Namibia. Yes, I'll come back to you.
No, thank you very much. Yes, no, I think for us, especially when we look for investments, number one, we look at local investors, we look at regional investors, and then of course we look at global investors. What you can see currently, you will see the global map as to which countries are the largest sources of investment. And then you will want to attract those ones. And of course, in which areas do you want to see investment? If you see in Africa, there's many, many potential areas of investment. I will come to the specific question, but if you look at the areas of investment, yes, we have been able to attract investment, especially in the extractive sectors. I remember like in Namibia, we said that investments that were attracted to Namibia between 2000 and 2015 were investments mostly in extractive sectors, investment in mostly sectors that are capital intensive, and therefore it's almost like we created one job for every 20 million Namibian dollars. But we want to create more jobs for fewer fewer million Namibian dollars. So when you attract investment, then it's a strategy that you have to formulate and not necessarily say, okay, I'm just going to throw my net out there and then hopefully there comes an investment. You first have to formulate a strategy of saying, in which areas do I want to see investment? Where is the source of those investments currently, and how can I make sure that those people with know-how and with experience, I'm able to attract them to Namibia? And yes, I want to attract them to Namibia, and I want to attract them to Africa, because currently Africa kind of probably attracts less than 10% of global FDI. So global FDI that is going everywhere, Africa is able to attract a few dollars. And yes, we want to make sure that we attract inter-Africa investment. We want to make sure that we attract Namibia local investment, but it's also important to make sure that we attract those global investment, because what happens now is those global investments go somewhere else, they produce the goods there, and those goods are the ones that actually come to Africa. So yes, now looking at specific examples, yes, let's talk about the beef. Luckily enough, Namibia was able to export beef to Ghana recently. Thank you to our ambassador who is here. And yes, we are eyeing more African countries for us to export beef and so forth. And looking at investment specifically, we have seen many companies that are diversifying their investment from Namibia. First, we go to our neighboring countries, whether it's to Botswana, South Africa, Zambia, but we have also welcomed quite a number of investors coming from other African countries. We have got, the other day we had a session here of investment and business forum here in Ghana, just the evening before last evening, and one of the investors from Ghana spoke there about his experience in Namibia. For example, we have sent out our attachés for investment promotion in Namibia. One of them is dedicated towards sub-Saharan Africa, because we do believe that there is a lot of potential in many countries in sub-Saharan Africa. The biggest investor currently in Namibia is South Africa, which is an African country, and we are seeing also Botswana investing a lot in Namibia. So yes, as far as I think investment is concerned, we do not discriminate where the source of investment is. What we do is identify our priority sectors, identify the priority products, and make sure that we invite investors into those sectors, whether they are local, regional, or that they are international investors. And I'm seeing that more and more of our colleagues in all the countries throughout Africa are following the same route.
Before I come to the audience, and Prudence, I'll come back to you. But Michael, this is for you. I've heard you say elsewhere, Michael, about the fact that there is the inability of a lot of African manufacturers, especially, and especially SME manufacturers, to be able to get integrated into the value chain because they can't meet volumes. And you seem to have some recommendations about partnerships across Africa. Can you elaborate on it? I mean, as a guide as to how they are able to take advantage of this big market, even though they are small?
So what I've spoken about is the need for a partnership of rivals, what I call a partnership of rivals in African business. The AFCFTA is really about scale. It's a scalable opportunity. And the businesses and investors that can really capitalize on it are those who have the capacity to scale within the AFCFTA. So that occurs at multiple levels. And the kinds of strategic alliances, strategic consortiums, and joint ventures, and partnerships that are necessary to enable our small-scale enterprises to begin to take advantage of these opportunities, those are indispensable. So small-scale manufacturers, agribusinesses will find it extremely difficult if they have to be exporting in the small quantities and the small scale outputs, it's not going to work. And so we need these strategic partnerships, which I call partnership of rivals, because you basically would have to find a way to partner with your competitor, in order to be able to take advantage of these big scalable opportunities. These are incredibly important. It's important because it affects the capacity of our businesses to raise financing. If you are producing and supplying at scale, it's a lot easier to raise financing at lower cost. Your transportation costs are ultimately a lot lower. You're able to take advantage of economies of scale. And we will not be able to take advantage of the economies of scale opportunities that the AFCFTA provide if our businesses are not building these relationships and partnerships, difficult as they are. They are not easy, but it is a necessity. It is a must. And we don't have a lot of strategic business alliances, in the continent. There's a lot of go-it-alone, one-person businesses. And if we don't begin to learn how to build partnerships, mergers and acquisitions, strategic alliances, we cannot compete. So that's a must. If we don't encourage our small businesses to do that, it's only the large corporations that are ultimately going to take advantage of all the opportunities. They will probably try and rope some of them into their, supply chains, but it's not the same. We need a bottom-up approach to scale business scale up in the continent. And businesses cannot scale at the level of a continental trade and investment, market opportunity if they try to scale alone, because it takes forever. You're going to have to go through a very difficult organic growth process. That's not how it's done. Our businesses, especially our small businesses, need to learn how to begin to build these partnerships and alliances. And perhaps, I don't know how, but our export, especially our export promotion agencies and authorities in the continent, which work a lot with our small businesses to try to do trade facilitation and market access opportunities for them, will have to begin to find ways of setting conditions for supporting SMEs, to assess markets. One of the conditions could probably be that we want to see you partner in another, local small business before you can qualify for some of the support that's available. Yeah. The second and the final one, I think, is that we're going to need a lot of exports trading companies and export aggregator entities as a critical part of the whole AFCFTA process. Because the expectation that a small-scale producer or manufacturer somewhere in Nigeria or Kenya should build the capacity to produce and manufacture and also go through the whole process of exporting and finding buyers in other parts of the continent is quite too Herculean. So we need trade intermediation. And trade intermediation has to occur within a very specialized ecosystem of, export trading companies and trade aggregator entities, which can specialize in finding the markets and the buyers. And they go to the small-scale producers and, support them and give them the contracts and, sometimes finance the production process. And then they take care of the whole trade intermediation process. We don't have a lot of these specialized trade intermediation entities in the continent. It's a missing link. I'm aware that the Afro-Exim Bank is trying to promote, the emergence of some of these entities. But I think that within the national AFCFTA strategies of every country in Africa, we need to have a segment that focuses on grooming and supporting other SMEs and other companies which are specialized and focused on trade intermediation. That's a missing link. We're supporting the manufacturers and the producers, but it's too much to expect that they can go through the whole process, go and find buyers, and it's too much. So we need to grow trade intermediation entities as a critical element in boosting after.
Thank you, Michael. I'll go to the audience if anybody has a question, but whilst the audience is preparing, Prudence, just think about this question. Yes, I can see a hand up there. If they can send a microphone to him. But Prudence, this is to you. You talked about a street where everything being sold was manufactured from China, and that's the reason for rules of origin and all that, etc. But I think you agree that sale of goods is not just a function of just a trade protocol and rules of origin. Cost of power is part of the cost of a project, of a product. Cost of borrowing is part of the cost of product. Cost of transporting, I mean, we all know, it's actually cost about $1 per ton to transport pineapple to 90 cents actually to Europe, but it costs you about $1.50 to transport it from Ghana to Cameroon, because it will go to the port of Dover and come back, because you don't have liner agencies. And therefore, what is the Secretariat doing? How are they working with the governments to solve these multiple problems that will encourage intra-Africa trade? So whilst you are about to answer that, if you can take the question from the gentleman there, and then depending on who it goes to, we can take those two questions together.
Respectfully, I invite you to the mics situated here and at the rear. Mr. Moderator, can we take 3 questions as a go?
Because there's already a question for Prudence, I will take that one, and then I'll come back to the audience. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, or good afternoon. Touching on the base of Chinese products. Anyway, my name is the Honorable Nasib Akil. I'm a Ghanaian entrepreneur, 4th generation. Touching on the issue of Chinese, I just want to make a comment. It's not the issue of the Chinese product. You know, we in Africa love everything that's imported. Many moons ago, I used to work for a tuna canning company or a food processing company. And they used to produce a brand of tuna called Sankofa. And it was all in the supermarkets. And they used to produce for Sainsbury's and Tesco's. People would not buy the Sankofa. The Sainsbury's and Tesco's would be re-imported back into the country, and they would sell in the supermarket twice the price of what the Sankofa is going for. And people will buy and leave the Sankofa. This is our problem. We need to look inward. As a local manufacturer, I have to compete with things like that, and it makes it very, very frustrating. So,
yeah, thank you. Thank you. I get yes, Prudence. Over to you. The other factors that affect trade, and after that, I'm coming back to the audience. Yeah.
Yes, I think. Let me first of all agree that something has to be done to bring the cost of production down, especially when it comes to the cost of energy, the cost of transport, improving the cost of capital, including actually improving our own infrastructure. Governments have a lot of work to be done. That's why I thought the benefits of FCFTA will not come automatically. There is a cost for each and every government. But also remember that we have to change our mindset. He's just said it. It doesn't mean that everything that we import from outside cannot be produced internally. And the cost of transport to import those products applies the same way it can apply when you are producing them within Africa. That's where the mindset change comes in. Have you seen a number of trees, the logs that are exported from Cameroon, from Gabon? They go all the way to China, and then we import almost all the furniture that we use in our own homes. Even when you go to Cameroon, you go to a hotel, you find 80% of the furniture in their hotels is imported, even if they know they are producers of trees. That's a mindset change where we don't have technology. It doesn't take 50 years to get technology. I think governments have to, invest in that. Then when it comes to cost of energy, I think that one requires heavy infrastructure, heavy investment in roads, in railways, but also in energy production. But I still believe if you attract investors, everything that we import can be produced within Africa.
Thank you. Yes, can we have your question? And if there are other questions, if they can, yes, so one there, if you can come behind the microphone after him, you come to you, we will take the 2 questions. Okay. Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. My name is Eugenio Reyes. I'm from Monterrey, Mexico. And this panel was like music to my ears. I really enjoyed it. And I do appreciate the fact that you were speaking about small and medium enterprises. And I guess for Mexico, it's similar to what it is throughout Africa. SMEs don't seem to get that much attention sometimes vis-a-vis the larger international companies. And you are focused towards SMEs, which is great. Now, what is your strategy to make them, sometimes it's harder to integrate them into exporting companies because the type of requirements they make are just unsurmountable, whereas it might be easier for them to export directly. What is your strategy to make ordinary mom and pop shops throughout your continents, your countries, to make them truly participate in the international arena? Thank you.
Thank you. I will suggest that question is taken up by Ms. Nangola, since you are from an investment promotion entity. So the strategy to make sure SMEs can take advantage. Yes, there was another hand up here. Can you please take the microphone? Yes, a gentleman in front. Yes. Here. Before I come back to you.
So yes, you want me to speak now, or you want her to answer the question?
No, I want you to ask your question. I'm directing each question to.
Okay, mine is not so much a question as it is a comment. I wanted to reinforce some of the comments that have been made. And
then let me take a question rather.
Absolutely.
I'll come back to you. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, panelists, for giving us, very outstanding presentation. The main reason was, why Africa is falling behind. One of the gentlemen, gave, some in detail information. I don't know if it works, We Africans, we have been talking for so many years, the same excuses and then the same reasons. But now today, because of this General Assembly, I'm able, to bring, a question to panelists. To add, my name is Gigi. I'm from Denver, Colorado, World Trade Center. I'm glad to be here. My question is, it's good to see, sister from Namibia. I was trying to get her name from here.
Miss Nangula.
Miss Anula, to see, a woman to be the forefront, on investment issues. It is very good to see. I have a good admire to Sam Nujoma, the first president of Namibia. And then it's good to see, to hear, about Namibia. So I'm trying to forward some questions for you. Africans, why is the reason we are giving excuses for our failure for so many years, for decades? Do we need a panelist of experts to decide and to give us, the pathway, how to go forward? This is my number one question. No more excuses now.
Thank you.
You remember, no, let me finish, sorry, yeah. You remember that when African OAU, Organization African Unity, was established in 1964 or 1963?
Can you please wind up the question for me because of the time?
Oh, the time, okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, let me make it short, okay. So, I want to know, do we have a practical strategy Africa to go forward economically, number one.
Okay, thank you. We get a question. If the next person can ask the question so that we've just got 5 minutes to go, actually.
Thank you, moderator.
Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is
Can you make it snappy? Your name is?
Mohammed Sise. I'm from Delaware, United States. I'm in the African market for the business with SMEs. Unfortunately, if I have to take a visa to Ghana, I need a visa for Cote d'Ivoire.
You want to change his microphone? Yeah.
Oh. I need visa for Mali. I need visa for Namibia. Basically to do business with Africa, I need 50 visas. If I have a visa for United States, I have access to 50 states. For China, I have access to over 1 billion population. For India, it's the same. As the driving force for SMEs, I want this to be part of your mission. We don't need to have a unified passport, but we can at least ease...
A unified visa, okay.
Ease unified visa system.
So, okay, thank you. So, the question on... or let me take the last question and then, the last question from you. That's the last question, actually.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for this awesome welcome and event that you're putting on. I'm a small business owner from the United States, and I've been hearing about the challenges your small and medium-sized businesses have. And my question is, what government infrastructure do you have in place to support these businesses? Because as we all know, small businesses are the engines of basically the global economy. And I also know that without government support, small businesses fail. So are you planning to have an infrastructure in place to support these businesses? And if you are, I'm available with my services to help to support. Thank you.
Okay, so I would direct the questions this way. The first one will go to Michael on small business infrastructure. From the Afro Champions perspective and as a strategist, how do you see the infrastructure for small businesses? And I'll come to Ms. Nangula, who appears to have 2 questions actually, including the one from Denver, Colorado, as to the excuses. And then finally to Prudence, who has to address the other question on why we need over 50 visas to be able to do business with Africa. Yes, Michael.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily separate infrastructure for small businesses from infrastructure for everybody else. It's the same infrastructure. And, cross-border connectivity, transportation, all of that, energy infrastructure to bring down the cost of energy, all of that is critical. But I think that for small businesses, perhaps the immediate infrastructure they can take advantage of is digital infrastructure. That provides a lot of possibilities to leapfrog a lot of the physical infrastructure challenges. So yes, it's critical that in our various countries, cost and reliability of power supply is fundamental. You can't really produce without that. So that has to be fixed at the national level. And that's like a very chronic challenge that I'm not sure how we're going to be able to solve it overnight. But we have to continuously advocate for things like that. But outside of the things beyond our control as small businesses, the ones that we can control, I think, are the ones that I'll talk about. And that's what I mean by digital infrastructure, where you can, interact with other businesses and potential buyers in other parts of the continent, just using digital tools, online trading arrangements. We've been talking a lot about creating the African e-commerce platform. I think it already exists. It's called WhatsApp, it's called Instagram, it's called Facebook. There's a lot of business booming on these platforms already. And we don't necessarily need to create an African Amazon. We already can take advantage of these digital tools and platforms that exist as a start. And I think that's the biggest infrastructure that small businesses can take advantage of at this stage, whilst we try to push our governments to fix the ones that governments have to fix. But those have been a very chronic problem that will take some time to fix. One more comment for me, and I very much like the issue of the unified visa that the gentleman raised. And it's mind-boggling why it's too difficult to do. The advocacy has been ongoing for years, and for some reason, it just wouldn't happen. So I think that African citizens need to rise up and just demand it. It gets to a point where I think governments need to recognize when citizens make a push. It's not just business associations making a push. Citizens have to make a push. I don't know how we will engineer that movement, but I think the only thing that will make it happen is if we manage to engineer a movement, one country after the other, that just simply says that citizens want this to happen, and it has to happen. That's the only way to happen. It's almost like a people's revolution, just to have a unified visa arrangement in the continent. We need it, because as we all know, trade starts with people moving. If people don't move, trade doesn't happen. So that's the second infrastructure that needs to be arranged.
Yes, Mr. Dangula,
Thank you very much for the number of questions. Maybe let me start just touching on the visa. And I think, yes, many things are probably easier said than done, but the One Africa passport has been on the table for many, many years. And I think, like the speaker has said, from a regulatory point of view, we still have 54 states with 54 governments and 54 parliamentarians and 54 everything. And therefore, that makes it very, very difficult to make a One Africa decision. But I think, of course, it starts with one state at a time, two states at a time. And the progress that we have made is definitely not where it should be. But I think the recognition should probably be paid where it's done. So recently, I think a month or 2 months ago, for example, Namibia and Botswana resolved to even just have travel between the two countries at one of the border posts using ID cards. We don't need a passport from Botswana to Namibia to cross borders if you go for 30 days and so forth. And those are the kind of arrangements that we can start talking between countries. And as we continue to build trust with each other, I'm sure that that arrangement will be made throughout Africa. So yes, there is still quite a number of limitations as to why we cannot trade. And yes, there is a lot that we need to do, which probably takes me to the question of excuses. As a human being, I hate excuses. I hate excuses for myself. I hate excuses from others. And I have had to learn a little bit with patience. So I know that sometimes we have got two extreme people. One person is the one that is too busy with Africa, what we have gone through, what has happened, and I say, okay, that is over, may we please move on. And there is another person who looks on the other side and says, just get over it and move on already. And this is probably a personal conversation, but I had a conversation with my son who I'm trying to say, can we just get over and move it? And he said, Mommy, it's like you break somebody's glass. If you just, like a mirror, if you just break it and then you kind of put sellotape and say, here is your mirror, I'm sorry, it's not going to be the same again. That mirror is not going to be the same mirror. And maybe that is what was done with Africa. Somebody took our mirror and just shattered it, and now they say, okay, there is your mirror, please move on. And maybe we need to start building a new mirror instead of trying to reflect still in the old mirror and build a new Africa. So there is definitely a lot of things that we need to do, and history is good and history is important, but I think we have noted history and we need to kind of say, how do we build a new Africa? Which brings me to a question that says, do we have a practical strategy for Africa? Yes, there is an Africa that we want, Agenda 2063. The Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is one of the instruments of us getting to the Africa that we want. Will we get there by 2063? Maybe so, maybe not. But I think, like I said recently, it's up to our generation to make sure that whatever our grandfathers and our fathers have put in place, we need to make sure that we realize that dream. Apologies for taking time. Let me go to my 2 questions after that long story. So, talking on the MSMEs, I think it was the question on the SMEs. I think I've addressed the excuses, so it's a question on SME. And apologies again if I'm being practical in my question. I'm an auditor by profession, so normally because I'm an auditor, I'm not very intelligent, I tell people, and therefore I follow things line by line. So with the question of saying, how do we make sure that SMEs are brought into the mainstream of the economy? Some of the things that we are doing, and I'm sure that many IPS are doing and countries are doing, Namibia is coming up with a legislation that we call the National Equitable Economic Empowerment. And yes, it comes because we come from a history where we have got 93% of the population that is mainly excluded from the economy because of the historical racial discrimination practices that were in Namibia. And with that law, we are saying, what is the best way to make sure that Namibians are included in the economy, and not just Namibians, but the young people are included, and especially SMEs are included. That law has been almost like in the making for many, many years because it faces quite a number of stumbling blocks. But one of the things that we want to do is, if you are an international player or you are a big investor that is coming into Namibia, and you want to do business in Namibia, especially if you want to have access to our natural resources, you want to have access to incentives and so forth, then we need to have a scorecard through which we measure the impact to Namibia. It's important that there is a win-win relationship, that the investor wins, but Namibia wins also. And on that scorecard, some of the items that we're putting is, how much are the SMEs involved? To which extent are you involving SMEs in your value chain and in your supply chain? And then, of course, if we give you land, then maybe we give you that this is land 100%, 70% is for the investor, 30% give it to the small-scale farmers who then you should train, you should help reach the quality that you have, and you give them the level of market access that you have also. So those are some of the measures and instruments that we are putting in place. And what our president did specifically is when he created the Investment Promotion and Development Board 2 years ago, he gave us the mandate of MSME development also to make sure that when we talk to investors, the SMEs are part of that discussion.
Thank you. Thank you. Prudence, can you take it in a minute?
Yes, I thought I would have more time because
we have completely run out of time.
Unfortunately, MTN says you have 1 minute remaining.
Let me just be simple on the issue of movement of persons. The reason why we have the same challenge that the gentleman has highlighted is because African countries have not been trusting each other. So that lack of trust is reason number one we still have these problems. And we believe we can build that trust through business. And I have a long experience about movement of persons in Africa, but I know, if I can tell you, the protocol on free movement of persons was signed at the same time with the AfCFTA agreement in Kigali. And today, that protocol has only attracted about 4 countries that have ratified it. I think they are waiting to see what happens to the AfCFTA, what happened to the market, to start allowing people to cross the borders because they have a purpose to do that. We have case studies in East Africa. They have succeeded to introduce a single tourist visa. We have been able to introduce the movement of persons using national ID, and this was only happening because of the East African Common Market. In my previous life, I happened to be a negotiator, and when we were negotiating the EAC Common Market, we did our study tour to ECOWAS to learn from them about the movement of persons, the success stories about the movement of persons. But now EAC is far ahead. And I was very happy when the Vice President this morning was talking about the card. The reason why we were able to move quickly with the movement of persons was because countries had issued electronic cards. Once you ensure that all your people can be identified across the borders, then there is nothing that will prevent movement of persons. But remember, we do not have those systems in place in many African countries, and I think that's where the solution will come from.
Thank you, Prudence. Some of the key takeaways from this session, one is that the AFCFTA Secretariat, from what Prudence tells us, is looking at the possibility of scaling down, for want of a better word, for SMEs when it comes to the rules of origin in some specific instances to enable them trade. That's a takeaway. Then there is a takeaway from Michael about the need for us to push, essentially from the private sector, to push and make a demand. And then between Ms. Nangola and a contributor from the audience, about the need for us to change our psyche, especially when it comes to demand of goods. I mean, I'll give you my personal suggestion on this whole business about passports and visas. And I'm aware about all that is being done. I think somebody needs to be very bold. If one African country can simply decide, take ECOWAS or ECA, that look, already there is free movement of people within the ECOWAS. What if one country decided that if you have a visa for Senegal, I don't need a visa for the rest of West Africa? I can't see, you don't need a protocol for that. You honestly don't need a protocol for that. And it will bring much more tourists to the country and much more money than the money they will lose on the visa application, which is where they are afraid of. I'm waiting for one country which will make that bold decision. Take a visa for any West African country or East African country, and you don't need a visa, you can come to my country. It will address a lot of problems. Maybe we need such bold decisions. But having said that, my appreciation goes to Michael Koto, Chief Strategist at Pro Champions, Ms. Nangola Wanja, CEO of the Namibia Investments Authority, and Prudence Sibahizi, Director of Institutional Matters at the AFCFTA Secretariat. And thank you to the audience. And please give a round of applause to our panel. Thank you very much.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, help me appreciate the panel. Please sit with me for a while. But my particular key takeaway, Mr. David Ofosudote, was the fact that this unique opportunity gives us an opportunity to volunteer our time, our talent, and our expertise to provide ready solutions to achieve our overall objective. Please put your hands together for our sister from the Caribbean who did that with such grace. Please, a round of applause. One such person who has also done so and continues to do so is our moderator for today. Ladies and gentlemen, he's the founder and senior partner of AB and David Africa, a Pan-African business law firm with offices in 6 African countries and a network of firms in 24 other countries. His experience cuts across 3 decades of lead advisory role. The reason I'm telling you all this is because he's donated his time, his treasure, and ladies and gentlemen, his talent to do this free of charge. The least we can do is to applaud him with a resounding round of applause. King Dave, we appreciate you ever so much. Thank you. Respectfully, I invite you down for a photograph together. Let me humbly invite to join you our convener, our gracious host, His Royal Majesty, Togbi Apede the 14th. It's a remiss of me not to invite the Minister for Industrialization and Trade of the Republic of Namibia. Please welcome her warmly, the Honorable Lucia Lipondo. It looks like the Namibians came here to dominate. We'll retaliate. We shall retaliate. Soon we break for lunch. A few announcements before we go. As stated earlier in the morning, can I please have the codes back on screen? If you've not signed up for your business field trip for tomorrow, for Wednesday, I beg your pardon, please direct your attention to the screen. We have 3 sectors that we want you to really pay attention to. The first is the power sector. Let's have the code. I ask that you scan the code to obtain as much information you need for choosing the sector. Okay, so that's the power sector. Yours will be visits to the Sunon Asogli power plant and the Akosombo power plant. Let's go to manufacturing. This field trip will take you to the niche, Cocoa Plus, and more. And the last will be the real estate sector. Your visits will be the Sanglemi Housing Project, the Dawa Industrial Zone, the Ghana Free Zones Enclave. Okay. It's 1:40. We reconvene here at exactly 2:30. Lunch would happen for our directors and senior officials at the Papillon, the 3rd floor. All of us, you'll be my VVIPs. At the Chef George is up the flight of stairs. Ladies and gentlemen, imagine for once a Zambian who got married to a Gabonese. They got married in Tunisia. They now work in Ivory Coast. What will their children have for dinner or lunch? Such is the nature of your lunch this afternoon. Bon appetit, and I'll see you shortly. The board and directors, respectfully, I invite you to join my sister here, who would usher you to your respective lunch area. The Papillon on the 3rd floor.
You've been gone, it's an empty home. Come on back where you really belong. You are always welcome home, welcome home. You've been kept down for much too long. Stand up, please.
Distinguished delegates, this is a safety announcement. Will the owner of this bag, which contains an iPhone power bank and an iPhone charger, please see me for identification? Ah, there you are. Okay.
You've been gone, it's an empty home. Come on back where you really belong. You are always welcome home, welcome home. You've been kept down for much too long. Stand up, please, and say I am free. Don't forget you are welcome home, welcome home. Come with me on this happy trip back to the promised land. All will be happy and gay. Come with me on this happy trip back to the promised land. All will be happy and gay.
Humbly, I ask that we make our way to our respective lunch areas. We reconvene at exactly 2:30, please. Let's make our way